I'm joined by my co-host, Casey.
Hey, what's up?
And Michael.
It's going.
You said how it's going that time.
Well, I did. Casey and I have an agreement to split those two phrases. And he
So
used
you
one of
just
them.
wait to see what he says, and then you say the other thing?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works. That's how, if I get introduced first, that's exactly what we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And now we know.
It was an unspoken agreement until...
I mean, now it's verbal, and we can get like a contract signed if you want.
You don't need a contract. That's totally okay. And you don't need a contract to check out our sponsor. You could just go shop there. There's Oasis Games. You can check them out at oasisgamesslc.com. You get 15% off your first order by using code CCMTG at checkout. You can also get 4% off of every order by using code Would That Be Good. Michael, what do you want to say?
I mean, buying things is kind of a contract.
You don't need a contract to go to their website, though.
That's true, but when you check out, and like make an account, it's kind of like you're signing a contract.
Kind of. Similar. Why are you doing this?
You
just have and want to ruin things today?
Yep. Unlike Oasis Games, we'll never ruin anything. Bam.
We'll never ruin your podcast.
It's boom. Can we trademark boom?
I feel like BAM is, I'll be
I
on.
need to know the answer to this question. Can we trademark boom?
Unlikely.
Very unlikely because it's a commonly used word, and
Bing
also
bang boom, maybe.
I'm sure that John Madden has already trademarked boom if it's available.
One of our listeners, if you can find out if we can trademark boom and how to get that done, I'd like a nickel every time somebody says it.
I mean, the problem
That's
is
so many nickels.
the
I
problem.
could be Donald Trump.
I mean, mostly just from
Sure,
you and
that's how
Casey.
we got rich. Yeah.
That's how we got rich.
What word do we trademark, Casey?
Huge.
Yeah.
Which is a weird one to trademark because,
It's not a
nobody
word.
says huge.
Yeah, but
Mostly
he's
just paid himself.
He says it so much. Yeah. It's the perfect crime.
It doesn't sound that good, honestly.
You know what is huge is being a Patreon. Yeah, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg. We have a new Patreon, patron of the show. Casey, why don't you give him a shout out?
Yeah, our newest Patreon is Tiago Machado, and I apologize if I butchered your name a little bit there, but
How's the bus?
what?
The one that I threw you under. How is it?
Oh, because you knew for sure you wouldn't be able to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a feeling.
You know what, though? He's actually really active and really awesome. And I'm really glad that he's here. I'm sure that you said his first name right, by the way.
Yeah, well, I know how to say that.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure if it's Machado or Macado.
Yeah. But
It's probably pretty close.
Yeah.
Either way, we really do appreciate it. It means the world to us. I have a lot of things now saved for us to be buying in the near future. I need to get new wristbands printed off for our patrons. You get a wristband when you are just when you become a patron. So we'll be sending you one at the end of this month. And there's a lot of stuff that we're looking into getting, and this is where that money comes from. Oasis Games is here to lend us cards, give us a little bit of store credit or cash depending on what we want at the time. And what this does is this gets us a new camera, sweet green screen for Casey, different things like that. So
it's the
we
long-term growth type of stuff.
Exactly. So we really appreciate it. If you have the funds and you could become a patron, go to patreon.com/ccmtg. It's starting at $1 per month. We do it per month to make it really easy for you guys. And anything is really appreciated. One update, it could possibly be by the time this is done. We're actually going to get rid of the $50 per more supporter, the commander level supporter. That was actually created because somebody asked us to create one for it. And what we're going to do is, at that level, you get benefits of all the lower stuff, and you also get to work with us on creating a training grounds once per quarter, if you would like. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to give that. I think that $25 per month has been a really popular amount, and that's a lot of money, to give to a podcast.
Yes, very much so.
That's more
We
than
really
Netflix
appreciate
and things
it.
like that, and we really appreciate all the ones that we have that do that. And some of them, don't always want to utilize the playtesting that gets offered there. So we're actually just going to add working with me on Trading Grounds when basically, once per quarter, if you have something that you want to hear talked about on the podcast, message me if you're a $25 patron or more, and we'll get you hooked up. We're gonna get rid of the big one and just bring it to there. And yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a really reasonable reward, and hopefully it'll allow people who are making a contribution to keep the show, keep
exactly.
keep
They're
relevant
already
to their
contributing
interest.
so much.
Yeah.
So like, if they want to hear us talk about something, we want to do it for you.
Yeah, that seems totally
Yeah.
reasonable.
And the other thing that I wanted to say with that is, it's we had some people leave this month, and they felt really bad, and they like sent me messages apologizing. And I just want to say that like, this podcast is free for a reason.
Right.
You never have to feel like you have to do this. We really appreciate it. It helps the podcast grow. I know that everyone's financial situation is different. So, but yeah, if you have the funds and you can, go to patreon.com/ccmtg. Check out some of the rewards. I'll be updating them again. We did update everything this last month, but I'll be updating a couple more things, and hopefully we can get some awesome stuff. So new reward for the $25 patrons if you're already a patron. If you want to come up with training rounds with me, hit me up. We can talk about it. So, all right. So, let's move on to the main show. Hashtag always improving. So, hashtag always improving is the point of this podcast. We believe if you're not getting better, you're getting worse, and we want to be doing that with you. It's really easy to get to plateau in Magic, but Casey and I don't actually believe in plateaus.
Yeah, basically, if you're not getting better, you are getting worse. Either you are literally atrophying and getting worse, or your community around you is getting better and you're getting worse comparatively.
Yeah. There's really not a point where you're like staying still. And even in those times that you're staying still, I find that typically people stop playing Magic and they actually get worse again. Their mechanics get worse, something changes like that. So we want to be doing what we can to be improving. Casey, what have you done this week to improve at Magic?
Well, even though I had my deck selected for the Grand Prix 2 years ago, I have tried to be as open about, the way that I'm going to approach it and, the exact 75, as well as I've tried to just play a fair amount of Legacy and not rest on the fact that I am well familiar with the deck that I know I'll be playing.
Okay. So just kind of we've kind of preached this a lot, like play everything and then, practice what you want to play and what you're going to play.
Exactly.
Okay. What about you, Michael?
That's sort of where I'm at too. I wanted to give some other things a chance, so I think I've played 5 different Legacy decks on Magic Online this week, at various times. I'm pretty set on Sneak and Show, but I just generally feel like you have to try something to know how you feel about it. Things aren't always they don't play out exactly how you think they will, for better or for worse. So just trying to make sure that I'm giving everything a fair shake.
Sure.
Just being thorough.
Awesome. I did something really hard. I've talked about doing it for years. This week, I finally did it. And so Carrie Fisher died this last week. I don't know how you feel about Star Wars at all, but Casey and I are huge fans. And she also has been I'm a fan of her in general. She was one of the biggest advocates for mental health in Hollywood. And, for those who don't know, I'm diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And it's something that is really, really hard for me. And so I did a video on it on YouTube. And one thing that I learned while doing the video is just kind of, self-evaluation has helped me a lot in my life. And I think that what good self-evaluation is and looks like, I think can be really helpful. And I think that it has helped me a lot. And I kind of realized that doing this video, when you are overly critical of yourself, it is not self-evaluation. That's just you like dogging on yourself, right? And that makes things really hard. Whereas, being like, what did I do wrong this week that I could do better at next week? That's a different way of thinking about something. That's actually saying like, where can I improve here? And I think that I'm gonna try and get even better at that this year. And I decided that through that video and through the next week.
I think that's true in Magic, but just in life too. Like, when you're needlessly harsh on yourself, it's hard to make a plan to improve if you're convinced that you're terrible.
Yeah.
It's hard to figure out things you can get better at if you're hyperbolic about your own abilities for better or worse.
Yeah. Do you guys were you on the? I don't know if you were on the podcast when we had PV on last on this show.
No, I was not.
So one thing that we talked to him about, it was right after he got platinum again, and he was, people had asked him on Twitter like, "What's the difference?" And he was like, "My attitude," and he talked about kind of the snowball effect that happens with a bad attitude, and so we got him on the podcast to kind of talk about it. And one thing that so it doesn't have to be self-evaluation on being too hard on yourself either. It can be like, "Oh, I'm so unlucky," and this happens in Magic all the time. But think about a coworker that is always blaming their surroundings on why they're not good at their job.
Yeah, it's the system, it's the customers, it's the vendors, it's whatever, it's something.
We all have that coworker, and it's really important to not be that coworker while you're playing Magic. And just in life, too. Like, I think that this podcast has really helped me. This segment of the podcast has really helped me, and I hope that, looking back on 2016 and now going forward to 2017, that I can get way better at this even more.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is easier to be happy when you give yourself sort of measurable and achievable goals and aren't needlessly hard on yourself, because, I mean, no one's perfect, and I think if you're in that sort of perfection or nothing mindset, it's just really difficult to be happy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's go on to. So we don't have a card of the week this week because there's no Magic. To be eligible for card of the week, you just need to be a patron of $3 or more. Once we hit a certain goal, we'll be able to do that every single week. No matter what's happening, we'll give you a card of the week to talk about, whether it's a spoiler that we'll give out later, whatever it is. We'll make it happen every week once we hit that goal on Patreon. But right now, we don't have one this week because there's nothing to talk about, and we haven't hit that goal yet. But we do want to do our final power rankings for Kaladesh Standard. And we did every single tournament since the beginning, so, right?
Yep, all the Grand Prix, all the Opens, the Pro Tour, everything.
Earth thing. So, this is literally exactly what I thought this would look like.
Yeah, I would have expected maybe a little bit higher numbers on one of these decks, but other than that, it's pretty much...
Number 4?
Yeah. I think it's because it was around early and late, but not really much in the middle.
That's my thoughts, too.
Yeah, I think the number 1 deck is sort of resting on its laurels a little bit up here, too. I think if we had 3 more weeks of this format...
Yeah, it could change.
It would drop.
Or if we just looked at the last 3 weeks of this format instead of the format as a whole.
Yeah.
But let's... so we're looking at everything. So how are things given points? So a lot of people oftentimes will... When they critique the show, one of the things that they'll say to me is, Spencer, you guys give these stupid power rankings where, like, you rank the decks incorrectly. This is the best deck. And I'm like... Oh, actually, no. We don't actually rank the decks ourselves at all. It's actually they're actually given a score based on Frank Karsten's method of scoring decks. And if you want to argue with somebody about it, argue with Frank Karsten, but you'll lose because he's like a genius.
Yeah,
well,
but also
it's not really about that, right?
It's about
This is about empirical data, which is sort of the whole point.
Right. Yeah. If you disagree with the
it
model,
was funny when I told them to argue with Frank Karsten.
He would be like, "What are you talking about?"
Because he would be like, "Why are you yelling at me?"
He'd be like, more probably like, "How did you find me? Who are you?
How did you get in my house?" Right.
You have to leave. Yeah.
Judge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
you have
go
to
up
meet
to
a
Frank
real
Karsten.
judge, which is like way less fun.
They don't respond when you raise your hand and yell "judge" either. It's really, really just
Yeah, you have
big
to say,
ass.
"Your
Actually, they
Honor."
look down on that. They're like, "What are you doing, Casey? What is the point system?"
All right. So you get 6 points for winning a tournament, 5 for second, 4 for top 4, 3 for top 8, 2 for top 16, and 1 for a top 32. We add them up for every tournament of the format, and in this case, and see what decks came out on top.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that we had 4 of the 5 decks on here in our Pro Tour testing, and one of them we had a Bant version of.
Yeah.
So we had some version of all of these decks in our Pro Tour testing, and they just all went through.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds about right, I think. I think it's pretty rare that you totally whiff on things, but...
Yeah, I mean,
Let's-
maybe in like 2 months, if Panharmonicon was like a force, that's something that we would have missed wide on.
Oh yeah, just gone, not at all. We did. I don't even know that we cast a Panharmonicon in Pro Tour testing.
Yeah, I didn't even know what it was until Grand Prix Denver. So
Well, what is the number 5 deck here?
Black-red aggro. This is mostly madnessy decks. Some more straightforward aggro, but all playing Smuggler's Copter, all playing Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Bomat Courier
Most of them
specifically.
playing Bomat Courier.
I think all playing Bomat
Probably all of
Courier,
them
and
playing
that's the
Bomat
card
Courier.
that like
Yeah,
is very indicative that you're looking at black-red specifically.
yeah, very true. You don't really see that card in white decks ever because they have so many powerful 1-drops right now. So
Are you talking bad about Bomat Courier?
yeah,
Oh man.
It was like one of the best cards in Proto testing. I actually think this deck is great. I think everything about this deck is great. I appreciate what this deck stands for, and I don't appreciate the way you're treating it.
I think it's a fine deck.
Judge. Judge, I need a real judge, not a magic judge.
But for real, I do think that this deck was always good, and it's so funny that like we had been pushing this deck as like you should play this, you should play this, you should play this, and it got its points all year long. Like it from tournament 1 to the last tournament of the year, it was constantly getting points. It was just always in the background, and I've been saying all year or all season, this is a top 5 deck. This is a top 5. And people be like, it doesn't do anything, and I'm like, no, trust me, like. It's a good deck.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of in the range that it's a fine deck, but it would be hard to ever have recommended this any given week as like a well-positioned deck, right? It's good enough, and it was going to sneak in here and there, but this was definitely, I don't think, one of the
So I'm looking
pillars of the format.
I want to kind of talk about the lists while we do these final rankings. We don't usually talk about lists, but I'm just going to pull some up from MTGO, and I actually really like this list. So we have Sinsho is 5-0 with black-red. And he has his list is, I think, a beauty. Really, I think that Michael would have played this at the Pro Tour if we had found it. 4 Inventor's Apprentice, 4 Beaumont Courier, 4 Scrap Heap Scrounger, 2 Bloodhall Priest, 3 Lightning Axe, Michael's favorite card.
Is that really my favorite card?
It seems like it.
Did you not know that?
No,
Did you
I
not know that was your
definitely
favorite
didn't know
card?
that. I'm happy to learn this.
2 Key to the City, 4 Smuggler's Copter, 4 Fiery Temper, 4 Unlicensed Disintegration, 2 Chandra, 4 Foreboding Ruins, 10 Mountain, 4 Smoldering Marsh, 5 Swamp, 4 Transgress the Mind in the sideboard, 2 Lost Legacy, 4 Galvanic Bombardment, 2 Incendiary Flow, 2 Tears of Volkut, and 1 Distended Mindbender. Perfect. This list looks perfect.
Now, you've got to play Reckless Bushwhacker to get value off your Chandra plus for mana. Everybody knows that.
Everybody knows that. But no, I think that this deck is just like a very good hyper-aggressive deck that has more reach than the other aggressive decks.
I think you get to play better removal for the most part. Like, you really get to play a lot of removal in these decks. And Bomat Courier is surprisingly effective when... I mean, first of all, you just play a lot of cards that are kind of weak in some ways, like, or situational. Like, there are times where Unlicensed Disintegration is a lot... Like, there are cards that you're okay discarding frequently. And there are some cards that you're really okay discarding because you can cast with Madness. I mean, I think this deck is just, like, pretty good. I don't know that it was ever the best deck any given week, but I certainly think that you could have, and I certainly did worse plenty of weeks.
Yeah, it was a deck that had plenty of perfectly good opportunities. It just was a little bit short, right?
It's just not very flashy, right?
Yeah.
This isn't like a deck that you like see and you're like, oh man, this deck looks so sweet. It's like
it's just a little bit low on power level.
you're mostly playing a bunch of cards that are like pretty synergistic and they're all pretty good, but it's not a deck that like blows you away.
Yeah.
That's
But I think, I mean, the deck costs no money,
Sure.
and I think is something that people should look at to see if it gets cards moving forward, because I think it's a very good deck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sweet stuff going on, and I mean, I think that generally your card quality is like surprisingly reasonable. Like where you're lacking in card quality, all the cards that you would say are the worst cards in the deck are very synergistic with the rest of it. And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. Like, this deck gets to see a lot of cards per game between Key to the City and Bomat Courier for this style of deck, and it still has draws that are probably really just uninteractive and like, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3. Bloodhall Priest kill you.
Yeah, Bloodhall Priest really ties this deck together, and it definitely can just kill you if you're not putting up resistance. This deck will kill you quickly.
I know that most of the testing we did with decks like this, if Unlicensed Disintegration is good against you, this deck is very, very good.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was always the takeaway.
Definitely.
Next up we have... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, nothing.
You were just going to say what I was going to say?
Yeah.
Oh.
So we were like dilly-dallying.
I was not. I was...
You were dillying and dallying, and you know it.
I've never dallied in my life.
Judge.
You couldn't do that now. You've done saying boom for the rest of your life. It's just raising your hand and calling judge. I do worry sometimes, like when I'm in a professional setting, saying some magic phrase, and I can totally see Michael, like, at a new job somewhere, and because of this podcast, somebody says something stupid at his work, and he just raises his hand, judge! And everyone looks at him, and he's like,
Nothing.
don't worry about it.
I'm not judging you. That's what I was saying.
You're not supposed to be judged. This is a judge-free zone.
Judge Dredd was a pretty good movie, and I liked it.
Etherworks comes in at 61 points. Honestly, people dogged on this deck so much. It's so funny. When this deck came out, people were like, it's terrible, you can't play it, the card's bad, the deck's bad. And I was like, nope. And it turned out to be like the best deck in the format at the end of the format.
Yeah, so, I mean, the version of this deck that people played at the Pro Tour was bad. And a lot of people played it.
Yeah, it's the version that literally Danny discovered being Danny downstairs in my house.
No. Danny and I built this deck in about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was basically the list that everyone played at the Pro Tour, which is like sort of sad.
Right,
Like the literal
we
first...
actually innovated before the Pro Tour, and Matt Nass top-aided with a deck that was like within like 4 cards of what you guys
came up with it in
Yeah.
about 30 seconds. I'm assuming they came up with it in like 30 seconds too, and
maybe
eventually played a
25.
bunch of test games, and we're just
maybe
Well,
less.
hey, that's what having Matt Nass on your team does. You come up with those decks in 25 seconds instead of 30. But
Right.
I'm sure they just like played it. We're like,
We got 5-second equity.
yeah. Well, no. He has 16.6% equity.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a way better way of looking at it.
Yeah,
Um,
he sounds
so-
valuable now.
Yeah.
But like this deck was just the versions people played at the Pro Tour were super obvious and like super linear in
So-
a bad way.
I actually
Yeah.
do want to kind of talk about that. So, Casey, you elected not to play this deck at the Pro Tour. You were actually going to play the deck at the Pro Tour after we had discovered the version that they played, and you ultimately decided not to.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because I thought it was bad. No, I thought that it was just too high variance.
Okay.
That I didn't feel comfortable leaving my tournament up to that,
Okay.
and I just wanted something that I felt like I was more in control.
Michael, you and Danny ended up playing this deck at the Pro Tour. I won states with the deck. Specifically the version. Why don't you talk about the version that you guys played at the Pro Tour?
It was fine. I mean,
What was different
compared to what?
to the version that top aided the Pro Tour?
I mean, we played some different cards, but I think effectively nothing. You still couldn't really.
I don't think that's true at all. I actually think that like what Jabberwocky invented is like better, is doing what we were trying to do better, which was elong the game with some middling threat to get you to your Eldrazi if you needed to cast
Right. I
your
mean, the
Eldrazi
problem is I don't think
instead.
that the version that we built was actually very good at doing that.
I-
We were really short on removal to play that game plan. We were really short on interactive spells to play
Sure,
that game
but
plan.
that was what we were trying to do, right? So we played Drowner of Hope and
Hedron Archive.
Archive
Yeah,
to try and get us to the point where we could cast
I mean, if we'd played Chandra and Harnessed Lightning and played like no blue, the deck would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
But you know, it is what it is. Like, it's easy with hindsight to say, "Oh, I wish I'd done this and this and this." But we were concerned about going too low. I think for the Aetherworks Marvel
Well, we
Mirror,
even-
and I think
we
that was
even
like a.
We even tried. That's true. And
It's
we
a
even
real
tried like a
thing.
version with Vessel of Nascency and
Ishkana.
Ishkana.
Yeah.
And I think the truth is that deck, the deck that ended up being the best deck in the format, actually wasn't good against the initial decks of the format.
Oh no, it would have been terrible at that Pro Tour. Everybody was playing a 4 Ulamog deck.
Yeah, you would have lost a lot of mirror matches. Like I think playing what I ended up on for GP Denver, that deck was like better than the Marvel deck in every matchup, but the mirror would have been terrible. So it probably wouldn't have been a good choice for that event. But
Yeah.
I think where this deck has evolved to is like a lot different than where it started, and a lot better than where it started.
Yeah, it is playing blue again. but it's not playing blue for a lot. So the current versions of the deck are roughly 4 Servant of the Conduit, 4 Whirler Virtuoso, 3 Ishkana, 1 Ulamog, 3 Emrakul, 4 Tune, 4 Vessel, 4 Harness Lightning, 4 Wood Weaver's Puzzle Knot, 3 Chandra, Torch of Defiance, 4 Aetherworks Marvel, 22 lands, and some counter spells and interactive spells out of the sideboard with a couple of Tyler's trackers or whatever you want.
Yeah. Yep. So I think like this version of the deck is quite good. Some people are playing white for Nahiri and that kind of stuff too. And whatever you like is probably fine. But I think this deck is like basically single-handedly pushed black-green out of the metagame because
that matchup is lopsided, to say the least.
Black-green obviously can win. It's a bunch of good cards, and like the Marvel deck is still not great when it doesn't draw Marvel, but that matchup is pretty miserable for black-green on the whole.
Well, the problem is for black-green is that black-green is a fairly interactive deck, and its interactive cards just don't interact very well with this deck.
Yeah, like Grasp of Darkness, Ruinous Path, all that murder, all that kind of stuff. Liliana. This deck doesn't really care about Liliana.
Yeah, just basically
none
at all.
of it is very good against what you're trying to do, so it's a little bit interesting. You would kind of think that like, you might be able to find some combination, but there's really no the spells that are good against Marvel are so different from the spells that are good against every other deck in the format that. I mean, this deck has basically single-handedly pushed green-black out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have literally nothing else to add. Let's move on to the next deck. We have Casey.
Mardu Vehicles. This was
How many points?
82 points.
I was wondering if there was a hard word to say in the name of the deck or something.
No, I just didn't know how many points it had.
Okay.
So I was grabbing a deck list. So
Fair enough.
Hashtag prepared.
I liked my version of this better.
Where I couldn't say a word.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could.
You know what? You can go home tonight, and when you dream of me stumbling over the word Mardu.
Okay. I mean,
he's like done. No,
sounds like a great dream.
I think that this is a deck that we tried a lot for the Pro Tour, like a lot, and we missed on one card.
Ceremonious rejection.
Well, ceremonious rejection would have been nuts if we'd ever gotten it that far. The problem is we never really tried.
We never even tested.
Well, we never tried Cultivator's Caravan,
Yeah.
and I don't even know that that was the issue as much as just I think our versions were generally a little bit too greedy, in terms of number of 1-drops of different colors specifically.
Yeah.
And this deck is just really good, and I think that we should have been able to recognize that you could pull it back a little bit from being the absolute most explosive possible, and still have it be powerful.
So one thing that people will notice, and I think that this podcast preached this also all season, is that white-red vehicles is not going to be on this list.
Yeah, it had a few points really early in the season. And
It was just a
basically
worse
nothing.
version.
It was good. It was good before people figured out how to build Mardu optimally. The difference is that white-red, the mana base was a lot simpler. You didn't need to play. There was just 2 kind of less innovation steps. So I think for the Pro Tour specifically, white-red could have been a fine choice because there was just a high chance you could build it correctly. And I think that at a Pro Tour specifically, you get a lot of mileage out of just having a deck that's really functional.
Yeah.
Because you're going to play against some number of people who have decks that basically aren't, working.
One thing that I will say about this deck is I always thought this deck was underrated in the format. I always thought that people were like, no, it's not good. It's not good. It's not good. I'm like, what are you talking? Why do people think that?
Because it's incredibly clunky. I played this deck for one tournament, and I thought it was very good for me for the most part. But, every game loss I had was because the deck was clunky.
Just kind of crapped on itself.
Yeah.
It's way less clunky than the white-red version that everybody loved.
I don't think that's true
Not
at all.
really. I think that you were playing every bit of a 4-color deck, and that just sometimes didn't work out for you. You had really specific. You basically need exactly 3 or 4 lands, and never 2 and never 5 almost.
Okay.
And that's just a really hard way to to win a game of Magic. When things are working, the deck is pretty close to unbeatable. But when it's not, you just can't win a game.
I think that the thing that you specifically said that I do agree with it wasn't even about the lands. It was that if you ever draw that second Cultivator's Caravan,
Yeah, I mean that's even worse. That you might as well just concede. But the
but
mana
you
base
still wanted
was
3 because you always want the first one.
right.
Yeah, there are just a lot of and there are like draws that can't beat Liliana specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, the deck does have a lot of things that
That's
just
actually what I was gonna say too. Just is it's the deck that's bad against Liliana.
I don't even know that it's bad against black green. It's just bad against Liliana if your opponent is on the play. It's just a thing
Yeah.
that happens. Like especially if they go like grasp into Liliana. Like
Game over.
if you're playing like blue white, that's mostly fine because you can sort of play around a grasp and like with this deck, you there's just no. If it goes badly at the beginning, there's no like pulling yourself back into a game. Really, you have to have some kind of board presence right from the beginning. And you know you get paid off for that. Like getting to play a 3/2 for one is like obviously
We are dogging
powerful.
on this deck a lot for a deck that we all in this podcast call the top 3 deck the entire format.
yeah no it's really good. I'm just saying if I'm looking for a reason not to play this deck,
And like my thing is, I agreed with Casey when he said it on the podcast back then. Was like, yeah, if you draw this second, it's funny because it was like Cultivator's Caravan is the best card in the deck, but also if you draw a second one, you'll lose.
Yeah.
you just mulligan in the middle of a game. Yeah,
yeah,
not
it's
that
like,
good.
Not really a good look.
It's like draw a card, skip your current draw step.
Ah, dang it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I knew I should have drawn a different one. But I think that what's important here is it does abuse something very important in the format. So why was Cultivator's Caravan so good? Well, it's because a 5/5 was really good in this format. And this card was a 6/6 a lot.
Well, initially
Yeah.
it let them play Ceremonious Rejection, which in the Pro Tour,
Was
the reason they
very
settled on this deck was really important. And as Marvel got squeezed out a little bit, it mostly became Mardu. And now I've seen some people going back to sort of 4-color Mardu.
Yeah, in fact, the version that I pulled up that just 5-0'd, just to get it, because we're given these, is 4 Thraben Inspector, 4 Toolcraft Exemplar, 4 Inventor's Apprentice, 4 Veteran Motorist, 4 Scrap Heap Scounger, 2 Thalia Heretic Cathar, 3 Harness Lightning, 4 Smuggler's Copter, 4 Unlicensed Disintegration, 3 Cultivator's Caravan, 2 Gideon, 22 lands, and it does in fact have 4 Ceremonious Rejection on the sideboard, as well as some Galvanic Bombardments, Sky Sovereigns, Gideons, Declaration Stone, and Fragmentize.
Yeah, this deck is really good against the Marvel decks generally. Like, Unlicensed Disintegration, I'm assuming that they moved up to 4 of those because of how good that card is against Ishkanah. And, like, if you can punch through an Ishkanah, Marvel can't really... Marvel is not great against this deck.
Yeah, well, and especially because they're usually at a pretty low life total when they play the Ishkanah, right? So they're at 8, they go to 5 after the disintegration. They have to chump block with their guys, and then they either need another Ishkanah right now or an Emrakul or the game's over.
Right, and post-board when you have Ceremonious Rejection, like, a lot of the time you could just leave mana up and attack, and because your curve is so low, you can even continue to develop your board, hold up both Ceremonious Rejection and Unlicensed Disintegration, like either or, and, like, it's just rough. And then you have, Kozilek's Turn isn't that good because you have the whole Cultivator's Caravan, Scrap Heap Scrounger synergy thing going on.
Yeah, we're just Smuggler's Copter and Inventor's Apprentice, like...
Anything, yeah.
Like, you have cards that just don't even die to it.
Right, plus Gideon.
Right.
Just for the, extra rub-in. But
Exactly.
this deck is like, when it's doing it, it's really doing it. It's really just... Your power level for this style, it feels very much like... Very unbeatable when it's drawing well.
Yeah. And I only played, like, really 3 standard events in this season. Or 4, I guess. 3 after the Pro Tour. And I did choose to play this at one of them, and I think that it's a good deck, that there's certainly no...
Yeah. You even said that you would have played it again.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if it continues to be good. Like, it's the kind of thing where, like, depending on what sort of, like, mana fixing... Like, a really little thing could make this deck really, really good.
Next up, we have Blue-White Flash coming in with 151. Huge jump in points. This was the deck after the Pro Tour. People just said Standard was solved. Nothing could ever beat this. And I think that that's understandable for them to feel that way because it was the Spellqueller Reflector Mage deck, and we had just come from a Spellqueller Reflector Mage format.
And it is really good,
Yeah,
right?
this deck-
The deck is like the least fun thing in the history of mankind to play with and against, as well as like every other Spellqueller Reflector Mage deck in history. Because there's only one other one.
I think this deck was fine to play with. It was definitely not fun to play against.
I
though.
actually thought it was interesting to play against more than with.
Yeah,
But-
I think that the games where it was unfun, it was really unfun, and then
That's certainly true.
like I think that's just true. Reflector Mage as a card. I think that it was a mistake, and I think that they shouldn't have printed it. And
Right, but I think pretending like, the Aetherworks Marvel games that are unfun are any better is, oh, hey, my opponent played a turn 4 Emrakul. That seems like really fair.
yeah, but there's a deck building cost to that. There's not a deck building cost to having Reflector Mage.
I mean,
You just have a Reflector Mage in your deck.
sort of. But it's also, you can actually like beat a Reflector Mage, even multiple. Like, I mean, it's true
Yeah,
that
but,
Blue White has maybe the best.
So hold on, you can't say like when you get nut drawn by this deck, it really sucks and it's unfun. That's not even the games that are unfun against this deck. The games that are unfun are the ones where you're actually in a top deck war. Like, this is the worst feeling. You're in a top deck war. You draw a card that's already in your hand that's a creature. You play that. They Reflector Mage it. You draw a land and you get time walked.
Sure, I mean, that's the thing that happens, but like...
Right, but
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
but like every person's nut draw is unfun. That's why every time somebody complains about a nut draw, I like get this upset. It's because everyone's nut draw is unfun, and like people don't like the nut draw from control. They don't like it from aggro. They don't like it from anything. But like Reflector Mage, the wording on the card is not fun. It literally says you can't do something that you should be able to do.
I
Right?
mean, I might argue that
Sure.
Marvel is the least fun deck in the history of Magic. No
I
deck
mean-
should be primarily about casting Mindslaver. It's just a stupid...
Right,
the
but,
games
like,
are stupid.
But why is that Marvel's fault? That's Emrakul's fault. But also, I disagree because I think, and we'll get to that. We can talk about this when we get to Marvel.
we already skipped.
we
We already
did.
done with Marvel.
we're already skipping ahead to Marvel.
no,
skipping-
Oh,
We already
did
finished
Marvel.
it,
Okay,
yeah.
sure. And that's true. We did. I would say that I personally find playing around the Emrakul and playing the Emrakul turns very interesting because I find that it challenges myself. Whereas I just think that Mana War was already a fun card, and they made Mana War unfun.
Yeah, I mean, I'd
like,
kind of say the
getting
same
a
thing
tempo-
about
getting a-
Mindslaver is already unfun, and jamming it on a 13/13 makes it even
No,
less
but that's
fun.
not. But I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that Mana War
Right, he's
was
disagreeing with you.
was.
So I think that both, like, certainly there are.
I'm mostly saying I don't think fundamentally there can be a less fun card than Emrakul.
I think the Reflector Mage might take over my least favorite card of all time over Hero Bladehold. But I do think that I don't know. I think that Emrakul can be unfun, so I agree with you there. Whereas I think that no game of Magic has ever actually been made better by somebody casting a Reflector Mage.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Reflector Mage is that if it's like...
when it's
It's
good,
just
it's basically
crappy,
just
but it's
3
also
mana win the
crappy
game.
a lot of the time,
That's
right?
my point though. Is like when it's exactly that. When it's good, it's 3 mana win the game, and it's also crap. Like he said, it's crappy 3 mana win the game. It's like I'm gonna lose.
Oh no, I mean it actually actively sucks plenty
It's
of the
her
time.
Lumina
Like if you are behind on the board, like Reflector Mage doesn't pull you out of it that well. It's really good at slamming the door shut when you're pulling ahead. It's not really as good, like the 2/3 part of it.
Well,
it tends to just get run over.
So I think that it. Am I looking for the word acerbates?
Exacerbates.
Exacerbates. Thank you.
Yeah.
Acerbates. Tweet that. Exacerbates.
But don't use that hashtag because I'm kind of scared of like what could.
yeah. Be very mindful of that.
But I think that it exacerbates something that people already don't like, right? Like, there is a subsect of people that play EDH that love Mindslaver, right? And
Sickos.
So I would say that Reflector Mage is a really high variance card, where to the point that it's unfun, where it can be really terrible in a lot of board states and just never matter.
I also don't like that it can be an answer for what should have been an unsolvable problem. Like when you look back on Rally getting this card was like, why?
Yeah, but what I don't like about Emrakul is that it's like a no variance card.
Yeah, I mean, if you're good at Magic, you're going to win the game.
You don't have to be. The thing is, you really don't have to be very good at Magic to
I've
win the
beaten
game.
plenty of Emrakuls because my opponents sucked.
I mean,
So that is true, but I think that fundamentally the card
Also, why are we
warps
talking?
the
Can we
game.
not talk about Emrakul? We're like literally supposed to be talking about this deck, and we're talking about Emrakul like the entire time.
That's just kind of the effect that Emrakul had on the standard. But
you think the
right,
game is
but
about?
I find it
you know,
interesting you guys think that because there was a poll. I actually just did a video on this today. There was a questionnaire is like people's least favorite cards of 2016, and Emrakul didn't come close to winning. Like Reflector Mage won by a landslide. It was like, it was
So
like,
I thought Reflector Mage was really annoying with Collected Company.
yeah.
Without Collected Company,
I think it's mostly
mostly fine.
So-
it feels
but-
bad, but
Yeah.
One thing that I do wonder about this deck in particular is when we saw this deck, this is one of the reasons that people like called for the banning of Smuggler's Copter, and I think that this deck kind of showed, like, you'll play Thraben Inspector just to crew a Smuggler's Copter.
it really showed that Smuggler's Copter was so good in these sort of aggressive style decks, like that. Just sort of like the card quality improvement you get with a Smuggler's Copter in play, ability to pressure Planeswalkers, like all these little things add up to the point that like you basically just can't not play it, and you also have to play cards to enable it.
Right.
Like, I mean, Thraben Inspector is fine, but that card would not be in this deck without Smuggler's Copter.
That's what, like, exactly. It's very interesting that this deck is like, yeah, we can play Thraben Inspector.
I mean, Thraben Inspector ended up in like half of these decks despite being really mediocre, but it's really good with Smuggler's Copter. So if you're playing Smuggler's Copter, you're kind of locked into it.
This has to be like the like the most overperforming card in Magic history, right? Like it's not played last season too.
Yeah, well, for like a hot second.
But like,
I guess people did play it in Bat Humans.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, because it saw a play and it's like actively bad. It's like
It's just like it's super mediocre, but it's basically always mediocre and never horrifyingly bad. So it can kind of scrape along as like the 56th to 60th card in the deck. Really, like a lot more than you'd think a card
How do
would
you
be
guys
able to.
feel about a deck that plays like it's funny because like you would typically want to call this a tempo deck, and it is a tempo deck. It's just like a different kind of tempo, but this is like a Selfless Spirit Thalia Reflector Mage Spellqueller deck that gets to top 8 at Avacyn and like throw the tempo into like high gear when it does it.
yeah.
But what about like all these cards being together? Casey, I don't think you've ever played this deck in a tournament.
No, I played a banned version of this deck that Matt Kling had built because he told me it was great.
But
But
like
I never actually played this deck.
all those cards. How do I say this? This deck is very like all these cards fit together like a really ugly jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, it's true. Like your bad draws with this deck are really abysmal. You sometimes play this deck and or against it and kind of wonder like how it's supposed to be
ever
good.
won a game? Yeah.
Because when it's bad, it's like playing all this stuff on the back foot, and they're like, sometimes they even have draws that should hypothetically be good, like something like Spellqueller into Gideon, and it's just not even close to good enough because they play like a lot of really bad cards, kind of to tie everything together.
Yeah.
And when they're on like the light on Gideon, light on Avacyn, light on Smuggler's Copters
They also
draws,
play
they're
a
just
lot
not...
of bad cards and don't have that many flex spots, which makes it even harder.
Yeah,
Well, you
it
rely
mostly
a
felt
lot
like the
on-
sorry, not to
Oh,
pay off,
yeah,
but it was just like the really bad version of green white from the previous standard. Like you're trying to get by as this Avacyn Gideon deck, but you're the whole bottom of an end of
But
your deck
sometimes-
basically sucks.
Yeah, but sometimes you're like a Selfless
Right.
Spirit Spellqueller Reflector Mage deck.
Right, which is like
Yeah.
you can like win games like that, but it's very much like kind of cheesing them out with these tempo plays and hoping that it's good enough. Like
Yeah, those cards just aren't as good as Sylvan Advocate and Lambholt Pacifist and Dromoka's
well,
Command.
they're not powerful on their own, right? It's like
Right.
when you draw a certain critical mass of them together, like when you draw like the second Reflector Mage to go with your Spellqueller, you can sort of chain together these games where like you basically don't play any cards that are good on rate the entire game and somehow win with a bunch of 2/3s that cost 3 mana apiece.
Yeah,
But I'm totally with you in the sense that, like, if you have awkward combinations of them, you'll end up with, like, a Reflector Mage, a Selfless Spirit, and a Spellqueller, and just get run over by someone who's, like, Smuggler's Copter. And you're like, oh, I don't have anything that can block a 3-power creature. This is awkward.
yeah.
Let's wrap this deck up with a question. Casey, I'll start with you because I know your answer. Westfell Abbey or no Westfell Abbey?
No.
No Westfell Abbey. Michael?
It's fine. I think I like 1. I know people played between 0 and 2. It's kind of a wishy-washy answer. It's like pretty bad sometimes, but I think the deck actually kind of needs the power level kick. Like I think in like green-white it was wrong because the deck was so powerful that you wanted to just like minimize stumbling. I don't think this deck is even close to that power level, and I think that you actively need the threat of this sometimes.
Yeah. I'm the same. I think 1 is exactly what I want. I think that 2 is what got Casey to hate the card so much.
No, the first one. The first one increases your mulligan percentage, which leads to losses far more than it increases your win percentage. The card is actively bad. And I'm actually just done talking about it. Lifetime.
Well, I don't think that this deck... I don't think this will survive the next set.
It would probably need a shot in the arm, I think, of some kind.
Because it's just good enough to like be one of the top decks. But like, if all of the decks collectively get a little better, I don't know that this one's... Michael,
Yeah, I think your bottom end draws are maybe just a little too bad.
Yeah, it needs
And
like
your
another
nut
like
draws
good
are a little
drop.
too selective. Like
or like a real 1-drop.
Yeah.
you need like too much of it for the top end draws to happen as much as you'd like, and you can kind of scrape a bunch of wins together from the worst draws in the deck. But I feel like, I mean, this is like the worst Reflector Mage deck of all time by a lot.
Yeah.
It's still a Reflector
Because
Mage.
the other two are like the
We're
best decks in the
oppressively
format
good,
by a
yeah.
lot.
But
Sure.
but you get used to like a Reflector Mage being a beating, and out of this deck, it's like surprisingly mediocre a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's really anemic.
I just haven't had that experience, but I think... I mean,
If you're
it's
on
not
the
true, 'cause
draw,
I like literally played against the deck 3 times.
yeah, just if you're on the draw and your opponent is playing something aggressive, it's just never good enough. Because they like Smuggler's Copter doesn't care about it really. Toolcraft Exemplar is a 1-drop that trades with it. If they just like untap and play a Gideon, or I don't know, this deck just like struggles. If it falls behind, there's the only way to catch up is like Avacyn Selfless Spirit, and that just isn't a thing that like happens that much.
Well, and if you don't have your opponent like dead on board, if your opponent casts Emrakul and you have this in your hand, you're probably going to lose because it means you're going to get Emrakul'd again. And
Yeah, I think just without getting it at instant speed off Collected Company, or like Rally could see a bunch of
You know
them every
what's
game.
funny? Is they changed the wording on Reflector Mage to make it better against Emrakul. So
What?
originally it could return your own creatures,
oh, sure.
but they were like, oh no, like this makes it really bad against Emrakul. And it's like...
Well, it would be worse against Emrakul if you
Yeah,
could bounce your own
that's
creatures.
true.
Right, but it was like... Also, because of how Emrakul works, like, it literally does almost nothing
well,
against Emrakul.
So it's not entirely true. I mean, I've definitely lost games where like you're too low on life to bounce it, but
Right.
you have
But-
to play it because they can play it on there. So like
Right, because
sometimes
if it
you
gets
get
bounced on their turn,
right, you get pushed into this corner where you just
Yeah.
have to, and like you're
Right.
dead because of it. But this is definitely like the way the Reflector Mage plays in this deck. I think it's mostly fine. I've rarely felt like this deck is like a super oppressive Reflector Mage deck, except in the sense that, you know, any pretty good card is sometimes really good when you draw like the third one. But
So the next deck is actually the deck that I think is the reason people really hate Emrakul. They just don't know it. And this deck actually is not a percentage of the Moto metagame right now. Like, it just isn't doing anything right now. But I think it does everything and Emrakul, and that's why people hate Emrakul.
yeah, I don't what I don't like about playing really.
So the next deck is Green Black Marble. Or
Green Black
Black
Delirium.
whatever.
Delirium.
I can't even talk.
There's a word
Delirium.
in there. It was some word. It's fine.
Yeah. Green Black Delirium. I want to read this list really quick. This is the last list 250. It looks very stock. It's just 4 Grimflare, 1 Tireless Tracker, 2 Pilgrim's Eye, 1 Cletus, 2 Mindrak Demon, 3 Ishkanah Graph Widow, 1 Noxious Gearhulk, 1 Emrakul, 4 Traverse the Uvenwald, 3 Vessel of Nasty, 4 Grasp of Darkness, 2 Transgress the Mind, 3 Grapple with the Past, 3 Liliana, 1 Murder, 2 Ruinous Path, 23 lands. I actually believe I have this exact 60, or pretty close to it, because there's no way I have a Mortuary Mire on my Cockatrice account.
I was gonna say I'm pretty sure I've played this exact deck like I mean, within like 3 cards of this, like
within 1 card of
like
this.
2.5 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's super stock.
Yeah.
Why are people still 5-0ing with this deck? If like it's
Because you
just
don't play
good
against
cards.
Marvel in every league.
It's just good cards. Like if you are good at drawing Grasp of Darkness when you're supposed to have Grasp of Darkness, like you're just really efficient creatures and removal and stuff. And
Yeah, I mean, this matchup or this deck is pretty favored against blue-white and pretty favored against Mardu vehicles. It's a significant underdog to Aetherworks Marvel decks, but I mean, it's not impossible that you could win a well-timed Transgress, followed backed up by.
but it takes a lot,
Yeah,
right? Like
by
you need
Grim
the
Players,
clock and the right disruption, and they have to not top deck Marvel. So
It's a big ask, but you could theoretically win. And if you just don't play it much, and you get lucky when you do, right?
it says a lot about the matchup. When you're talking about a matchup and your words about it are, you could theoretically win and no one disagrees with you. It's like, yeah,
well, how could they?
yeah, no, it's a completely accurate way. You can theoretically win, you just won't.
Yeah, you just probably aren't going to.
So I want to talk about what I was saying earlier. I do think that this deck makes Emrakul really annoying, and the reason that it does it is for kind of similar reasons as to the Jabberwocky version, but it kind of pushes it in like a really annoying direction. And I think the reason that people found it so annoying is that there's only one Emrakul in the deck.
So they never get Emrakul flooded, but they always have it.
Yeah,
Right,
which is
yeah.
like super annoying. It's like, man, I hope they don't draw Grasp or Traverse or Emrakul here. And then they're like, Liliana minus. You're like, oh, I forgot they could also have Liliana.
Yeah, this deck, just the redundancy is really high, and like the biggest thing is that you spend all this like blue-white flash especially, right? You spend all this time like kind of trading haymakers, right? You're like Avacyn, Gideon, Ishkana, whatever. You're like kind of trading punches back and forth, but you know that there's like this cap on how long a game can really keep going, and that cap is Emrakul. Because like sooner or later, it's going to happen every single game.
This deck is actually one of the main reasons that you ended up playing Temur Emerge at the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's like if we took Aetherworks Marvel off of this list, Temur Emerge would probably be a deck on this list.
Yeah. I think that blue-white flash would be a really hard matchup. I don't know that you could really even do that much for that matchup.
Interesting.
But I think that I think that it kind of plays in the same space as Marvel, but it's just a little bit worse.
Yeah.
So
That if you're gonna play that many Emrakuls already, you may as well
just
really
be
play
the
that many
Emrakul deck.
Emrakuls.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that this deck has a pretty hard time with Emrakul, and like the mirror match is your primary motivation for playing Emrakul, is because if they have it and you don't, you could just never win.
Right.
It's kind of like Emrakul is usually not going to be fast enough against the aggressive decks, and Blue-White Flash just can't really hurt itself that much with Emrakul. Like Stasis and Air, you can't hit their things. Like you can't Reflector Mage their things.
I mean, it's always good, right?
Yeah.
But it's never
great.
rarely like just end the game.
Never
on the spot.
backbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that black-green it's just going to stay a great deck. Like, I just called this super tuned list stocked, right? Like, there's so many people that have jumped on this deck and have worked on it that, I mean, if it gets 2 cards and Aetherworks Marvel gets pushed out, like, it's just going to be one of the best decks again.
So I think what makes Emrakul unfun really is that it makes every other late game in the format. Like, notice that Torrential Gearhulk, really powerful card.
Oh, crazy powerful.
Not on this list and no
Sees-
chance to be on this list because
sees no play.
like why would I do that when for like 1 mana more and a little bit of deck? I mean, in green black there isn't really even that much deck building cost. I mean,
No, Green
what
Black already wanted to do all of that.
right, it's like what
Right.
bad, you're mostly enabling broken Grim Flayer kills with a lot of the Delirium cards more so, and Emrakul is
Ishkana.
just and well, Ishkana I think is mostly good because of Emrakul. I think it's just
it's
like
mostly pretty good against blue-white and aggressive strategies.
yeah, but it gums it up so much that
Right.
you have time to get to the Emrakul part of the
Right.
game. But the fact that like there's a part of the game which I would consider for like
The fact that you
half
just
the
named
decks,
something-
yes, it is the
named something
Emrakul
in
part
the
of the
Emrakul
game.
part of the game.
It's
Yeah.
a one of in this deck, but you win basically every single game either by. I mean, your opponent just not being able to kill a Grimflayer, or eventually you cast Emrakul, and then maybe they kill it, or they just die to the first one. And if they kill it, you just, whatever, rebuy it twice more, Emrakul you again, Emrakul you again. Every game.
So, that's probably the most heated we've ever got talking about Standard since Michael came on the show. But I've been said, and I'll say it, I think this is literally the best Standard format that I've ever played in. I hope that it continues. How do you guys feel about it?
I think it's
good.
I think it's okay. Like, the card.
Before Aetherworks Marvel was the best deck, you felt similarly to me.
I liked it better when it was mostly black-green versus blue-white, because I felt like even with Emrakul, that matchup was really, really skill-intensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Marvel versus blue-white matchup is still pretty skill-intensive, but that Marvel in general just, like, leads to sort of unfun games of Magic in a way that very few cards... because it increases the variance of the game. Like, Marvel mirror matches are pretty terrible.
Why
right?
people hated Collected Company.
Well, except this is a lot worse because you have to jam your deck full of bad cards, right? Like, you're going to play, like, 4 Emrakuls in your deck.
Not like
just,
medium
we're
cards
doing
like Duskwatch Recruiter, like
No,
bad
no,
cards
this is-
like Glassblower's Puzzle Knot.
Right,
Or Woodweaver's Puzzle
whatever,
Knot, yeah.
right? But you're playing all these
I mean,
cards.
they also did that.
Yeah, exactly.
You're playing all these cards, right? And ultimately, it's very frustrating to, like, you win and lose a lot of games where either you play a Marvel on turn 4 and activate it and brick, and your opponent doesn't find a Marvel for like 3 turns and then plays it and then Ulamogs you, and you're like, oh, of course.
Casey?
Yeah.
A great game of Magic.
I think that this Standard format does have a lot going for it. I think that without just a few cards, this format would be very wide open. I think it's just really top heavy as far as the best cards go, and that makes it not as good as it could be. But I think that this format is a lot better than people give it credit for. It wasn't like the rally format that was actually miserable.
It's better than that because there are multiple decks you can justify playing.
Right.
I think
all of these decks.
that's really makes.
I think all 5 of these decks are completely reasonable. And then, if you're in the right format, sometimes you could play Panharmonicon.
Yeah, I think the gameplay is maybe worse than it sometimes is. Like, I think Marvel pushes it in that direction a little bit.
Actually, that's not what I was going to say. I thought we were going to say the same thing there. I think that it's, like, how terrible they've made... Like, the fact that my Torrential Gearhulks, like, get back the crap that they get back...
Get back Anticipate.
Yeah, like... Which, by the way, is fine. Like... I
don't even think Anticipate is the problem. Like it's
the fact that I'm like main decking a Summary Dismissal because I like have to, and and also because like I have to beat a Liliana like is even worse. I don't know. There's a lot of
there are just some really weird. I think this format could be a lot better with like the card Hero's Downfall.
I was gonna say
if they just if
similar,
just Aetherworks Marvel wasn't a card. And Hero's Downfall was a card.
I actually wonder if you would feel that way if just Emrakul didn't have protection from instants.
Maybe, and if there was like a good way to just kill him.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he gets stasis snared sometimes, but like or if you didn't get the cast trigger off Aetherworks Marvel.
Yeah,
I think if Aetherworks Marvel just put it into play.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I would agree with that too.
I don't know if they.
I actually think that I would completely agree with that, and I love Aetherworks Marvel.
I don't know if they anticipated it being a drawback, like because it could get countered. But it makes, like, Ulamog is especially stupid, and Emrakul...
And when they hit that one of Ulamog, you get, like...
Oh, man. It was last time I played Aetherworks Marvel, it was me hitting all the Ulamogs. I mean, I just recognized that, like, it's not interesting Magic.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up. Let's go to our training round. So, every week on the show, we're going to talk about something to get you better at Magic, possibly. We're going to do it, because of our sponsor, Oasis Games. You can go to oasisgames.com. And this week, we're going to talk about... we got a question from one of our listeners, and if you want to shoot us a question and turn it into a training round, you just have to be a patron of $25 or more per month, and we will definitely work that out with you. But he asked how to prepare for a format with just one new set coming in. So not preparing for like a brand new standard format where you have to jam all the decks or anything like that, but really focusing on like what do I need to do my best at the first tournament with one new set coming in. That's a really good question. So we have a few things that we want to talk about. Looking at playable cards is one of the first things that we put down here, Michael. What do you mean when we're looking for playable cards? Like, what does that entail?
I like kind of flipping through the spoiler, if before it's spoiled or when it's all spoiled, whatever. And just looking at cards that seem powerful or interesting, or just cards that I think I'd be interested in playing with. I think that's a really good place to start, right? If you trust your ability to evaluate stuff, you mostly can get a good guess, at least on a lot of the cards that other people are interested in too.
Casey?
Yeah, I agree. Like that's the best starting point, because trying to just build an entire deck is not, it's not going to be productive, because you're trying to make a decision with incomplete information.
Not only that, what could be? Oh, did this just get spoiled? Ornithopter's in this set.
Ornithopter.
It didn't just get spoiled?
No, it was a masterpiece.
No.
Oh, that non-masterpiece.
Yeah, like
Ornithopter?
it's in the set.
Oh, sweet. That sounds awesome.
What's sweet about that?
I like Ornithopter. Maybe they'll reprint in Soul Artifact, and I'll,
Yeah.
to traumatize some people.
Oh my gosh, please don't. Anyway, but actually, this is a really good point that I want to bring up. Casey, you just said, building a deck from scratch is really hard, and looking for cards you like is really easy.
Yeah.
So, when you mash the two together, it just makes your job way easier. For example, he just said he likes Ornithopter, right? So when you
okay.
see, no, hold on.
Let me backtrack on what card I'm excited about here.
We're gonna use Ornithopter as a.
Sure.
So I'm like,
Michael is a well-known Ornithopter lover.
Brother Michael is a well-known Ornithopter lover.
I'm gonna play Ornithopter in Black Green Delirium.
That's gonna go over great.
So I can plus
Can
my
I
own.
just say what I'm gonna say? I hate you. So we take a card like Ornithopter, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I love Ornithopter in my Legacy affinity deck that has been bad for a little while, and I love it really in my modern deck.
So, but like realistically, like with the last set, right? Like a bunch of us immediately identified Smuggler's Copter as a card we were interested in.
Why are we doing that? I was not done.
Well, just so that it's a better example of like why you would be attracted to a card.
Okay, but that could be a legitimate reason that you're attracted to a card.
Sure.
Right, is that you loved this card already. I think that maybe you're right. Maybe new cards is the better example.
Just for some reason you think it's power. You think this card looks powerful.
Sure. Yeah, no, go ahead. Finish what you're saying. I changed my mind.
So
I decided you weren't being annoying.
Okay. So you see this card, right? And you're like, okay, Smuggler's Copter. So what I want to say is, instead of trying like one deck with a bunch of new cards, I'm more interested in trying sort of shells that I know will sort of work, and not really focusing on how good the deck is, but just trying to see how much I like that card.
Sure.
Because I think trying to evaluate your deck building as a whole, like...
And this is why I played against 7 Noose Constrictor decks.
Right. Because we thought Noose Constrictor might be...
is a strong word.
I thought Noose Constrictor might be good, so I tried Noose Constrictor here and there, and ultimately you end up...
But you find out really fast, right? You didn't end up on a Noose Constrictor deck, right?
Right, but like a bunch of us almost ended up on decks playing Smuggler's Copter, because that was a card that like every deck we tried it in, it was like, oh man, this is the best card in the deck, and it's not close.
So with a set like this, where the set's coming in, you should probably start with known decks, right? It's like, what does this card add to this deck? What does this card add to this deck? And what you might find is a meshing of things. It's be like, okay, so like my Grixis control deck didn't really want dark intimations. That's how you say it? I don't remember how you say that word. But it turned out that Fatal Push was like really good for this strategy and gave me something that I didn't have before. And it's like, but wait, what if I just put Fatal Push into this shell with this card that I also like, and it can kind of mesh the two things together.
Right. I mean, you have to start sort of deck building at some point. I just think if you're looking at trying not to overwhelm yourself, I think sometimes just like looking through a list of cards and just being like, I think this could be good.
And it
doesn't have to be high pressure, right?
And one of the things that you can do is really look at what other people are saying about what's going on, right? You don't have to do all the work. Luckily, there's 3,000 Magic websites for you to go take content off of, and Reddit if you hate yourself.
Yeah, you can outsource some of that work for sure.
Meaning basically all of it if you want to, right? I mean,
yeah,
there are other people who are speculating about what'll be good. And the trick is then to just play some
I mean,
games, and if you don't think they're right,
Quentin
then
Pierce
move on.
literally day 2 to Pro Tour doing just testing against the gauntlet that Jerry T provided. Like,
Yeah.
so it's certainly not in the not realm of possibilities. Because what I think you'll find by like testing other people's strategies that they come up with against your own ideas is you'll find some common ground and like build good decks, and you'll find something. And then the other thing that will happen is you'll play against a lot of different cards, right? If you're testing other people's ideas. So Michael's excited about Ornithopter, as we all well know. And somebody else might be excited about like Fatal Push or about Tezzeret, right? And
And we'll find out that some of us are smarter than others. Likely not me.
But one card, for example, the first one of the cards that I saw today, I was not excited about. It was actually one of those reread the card moments because I saw Greenbelt Rampager.
Is that the 1 mana guy?
Yeah, so it's a green for a 3/4, and when it enters the battlefield, pay 2 energy. If you can't, return it to your hand, and you get an energy. And I was very confused by the card because I thought it was 1 green for a 3/4 that you got 2 energy. And if you couldn't, for some reason, get 2 energy, you just got 1 energy and returned it to your hand instead.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't know what situation would come up where I couldn't get 2 energy when I get 2 energy and a 3/4 for 1 green.
This card sounds
seems
great.
really good. But no, then after reading the card became really interesting to the people around me. They really liked the idea of the card. They thought it was really powerful. And, as typically happens with me when I think that Silence the Believers is, what I thought Silence the Believers was.
Right.
I just get really low on Silence the Believers after I read it
Yeah,
again.
right, even though people ended up
Sure.
playing Silence the Believers, and it was mostly a fine card.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
wasn't, 4 mana exile every card in play.
4
It
mana
was-
Plague Wind.
Right. Not even just exile every card and play.
Exile all your
cards.
opponent's stuff,
Oh, yeah,
and then
just your opponent's stuff.
yeah.
But somebody could get excited about Greenbelt Rampager, and they could build a bunch of Greenbelt Rampager decks, and you can test those decks against your, senior Edificer deck, right?
Yeah.
I'm just naming a bunch of
Right.
spoilers.
Sure,
now,
but whatever, right? So you
It's
start with these
Senior
cards,
Officer.
and you
It's a rare. It's a legendary.
and
So
you
he's senior because he's a legendary creature.
Yeah, he's Mr.
All right.
Edificer.
That sounds great. But right, you're mostly just like trying to get a feel instead of like, is this deck as a whole good? You're sort of like, okay, is this card good or am I way off? Because sometimes you'll play a card like that and you'll be like, oh, this card's gonna be so sweet, and then it ends up just being really clunky and it never works like you want it to, and you end up basically thinking, I don't know why I thought this card was good. And sometimes you're wrong, but oftentimes if a card is like a lot worse than you thought it was in the first places you try it, it's not going to end up being worth your time to figure out. Like we tried Chandra in a bunch of different
Oh my
decks,
gosh.
Yeah.
and basically came to the conclusion that Chandra sucked, and like,
And then she ended up being like,
well, she ended up being
insane.
in one
one-
deck,
in one
right?
deck.
But we could have wasted a whole lot of time trying to make a card
No,
that
we
wasn't
had
good
that
for.
deck. She just sucked in the format we were playing.
But like, I just don't think if you are excited about a card and you try it and it keeps underperforming, it's possible that you haven't figured out the shell. It's also
Yeah.
possible the card just isn't as good as you hoped it would be.
Casey, when you think about looking at cards, how often do you care what Wizards tells you to look at?
Like on Twitter
No.
or
Like, in like what they're pushing. So Smuggler's Copter is a really good example of that, right? It's like, wait, what does this card do? Why does this card have 700 words? Wizards, what are you trying to tell me? Right?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you have to look at if a card looks pushed. You definitely it's worth a second glance. It's especially true of cards that have weird stats or have weird numbers of things. It's like obviously this card like went through some development. It wasn't something they just put in, and that means that it's probably worth maybe more looking at than you thought at first blush. Or yeah, just trying to be aware of what the deck is
So
capable of.
how do you tell what Wizards is trying to tell you, Michael? How do you tell a card is being pushed?
I mean, we saw a bunch of that with like, I don't know that necessarily trying to be pushed is quite how I would describe this, but like the energy deck, right, where you're getting like a lot of, it's being pushed in the sense that they're like giving you a mechanic and sort of saying, here, spend 10 minutes and you can come up with a pretty decent build of this deck.
Right.
I don't know that it was pushed in the sense that it was overpowered, just that like they're saying,
You know,
hey, look at me,
Right.
look at Voltaic Brawler, look at Bristling Hydra, right? These are cards that like.
And that was a really good starting point, right? Even LSV for the Pro Tour was like, yeah, I spent a lot of games trying to figure out if I was dead to Electrostatic Pummeler. Like,
Yeah.
legitimately, like they had to worry about that. You know, and that is something that has continued. Like, people still 5-0 leagues with Electrostatic Pummeler.
Well, and it makes sense, right? Like if you have a lot of cards that support some sort of archetype, it's worth looking at. If there are a couple of those cards that excite you because of power level, it's worth looking at them and just trying to see how the deck functions and that kind of stuff. Right? I mean, I guess that's a little bit less common with small sets, just in the sense that you're not generally getting like huge new mechanics. But maybe what you should do instead is go back and revisit some of the decks that were close before and maybe got a couple of new little bumps.
Yeah, they got a bump. We put here learning to trust yourself and getting a feel for like cards, and that comes from that testing that we talked about a little bit earlier. You know, when I mentioned playing with other people's ideas, I mean that. I actually mean like if Jerry Thompson, Brad Nelson, Todd Anderson, Paulo Viter, whoever it is posting a deck list before a Pro Tour, test it. Like, why not? What's the worst that can happen? And then you can build upon their ideas if you really like it. Or you can just learn and get inside somebody else's head. And then you can get a feel for what's going on. And you really need to learn to trust that feeling that you have, right? Like, if you spend your entire time worrying whether you're right or not, eventually you have to make a decision. Otherwise, you're just going to run in circles.
Well, I think...
Yeah,
go for it.
You have to try to get something out of it. Don't just test the deck just to test it and check it off your list. Try to figure out, okay, what is the reason that somebody who I respect would write out this deck list? What's going through their head? And try to see what the theme of the deck is, what direction what role it's supposed to fill, what the deck looks like when it's functioning properly. And then see if maybe, even if you don't necessarily like the deck, what was worth getting out of it.
Right. Like, what powerful interactions were there in that deck that maybe you hadn't tried yet? Like, I remember there was that green-white deck from right before the week before the Pro Tour, right? That was like the green-white beatdown deck with Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah.
And we had never really tried Fairgrounds Warden, but had never considered that it might be good with Smuggler's Copter specifically.
Right.
And, like, I don't think any of us ended up really that close to playing that deck. But, like, it's worth looking at that kind of stuff. And it's also worth just... because you think someone is better than you, not taking their word as, not just being like, well, I didn't like this deck, but Brad Nelson does, so snap playing it, right? Like, you have to be willing to say, hey, there are things about this deck I don't like, I would like to change it, or I think this is an interesting interaction, but I'm not just
you actually bring us to the next point that we wrote down, perfect transition, which is not getting too focused or pigeonholing yourself, right? And that's a perfect example, right? Like, saying... well, I don't like this, but Jerry Thompson says it's good, is just a terrible reason to do something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've heard many of our friends and other people around say, oh, well, I read, I was going to play this, then I read this article, and now I'm playing this.
It usually doesn't end that well.
No,
like,
basically never.
You pretty much, if you don't, because it means you either haven't tested it,
right.
or... even worse, you tested it, didn't like it, and played it anyways, which is sort of, the doubling down on the bad feelings version.
And also, when we talk about pigeonholing yourself, one of the huge mistakes that we made in Pro Tour testing was we kept evolving Black-Red aggro, right? And then we would crush this other deck, and crush this other deck, and crush this other deck, and crush this other deck. And then, but what we weren't doing was evolving all the other decks. And so we had pigeonholed ourselves into saying, like, this is the best aggro deck. Let's make it the best we can possibly make it. But we didn't make the Bant deck the best we could possibly make it. We didn't make which would have ended up being probably blue-white. We probably eventually would have cut green.
Well, that's something I was going to touch on when he talked about Fairgrounds Warden, right? That's what we liked when we played Fairgrounds Warden. We were like, oh, you know what's really strong with Smuggler's Copter? Reflector Mage. So I started playing this Bant deck, and we were this close, right? So just being able to, even though that green-white deck looked terrible on paper, it actually had some very sound logic behind it.
Yeah.
Well, and it wasn't... I mean, I wouldn't even say it looked terrible. It was just kind of uninspiring, right? It was very much like a bunch of 4-ofs, and... yeah. They found some interactions they liked, and they were like, these are the ones we're going to roll with. And I I think that understanding that everyone has to do that, especially in week 1,
Yeah.
like there's no
metagame.
there's no, secret to like, oh, this is how it works, and someone who's better than you is always going to figure it out, and you're never going to figure it out. It's just not. It's hard. Like,
Magic is hard.
and I think that the point on like working too much on tuned deck lists is why I think especially early. I mean, obviously, as you're getting close to a tournament, you have to try to make the deck you're planning on playing better. But early, thinking about the cards rather than the decks, because otherwise what you're going to end up doing is picking cards that aren't as good, but spending more time on making the deck cohesive, and they're going to beat the crap out of all the other just bad decks you've built.
Yeah, so one of the things that we put next was tune as much as possible, but not just the stuff you like. So it's like, man, this deck is... this is actually how Abzan was invented. If you remember the Ari Lax interview for that Pro Tour, is they just kept tuning everything. And one of the things that happened is somebody came up to Ari Lax and they were like, hey, like, I invented this Abzan deck with Siege Rhino, and I think it'll crush all these decks that we're really good against, that were like our best decks in testing. And then Ari Lax was like, well, like, you just shoved a bunch of good cards against like the decks that we're playing. Like, if I just build my deck like this, I'll crush you. And then he lost to Abzan. And he's like, well, if I build my deck like this, I'm sure I'll crush you. And then he lost to Abzan. And he built his deck like this, and he's like, oh, like...
No, this deck is just actively
Actually,
great.
because we had tuned all of these other decks, and then built a deck to beat all of them, we ended up with something that was good against everything, and it lasted the entire format.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they would not have come to that conclusion if they hadn't tuned everything.
Well, if they hadn't, well, it's like having an idea of what is good, right?
Right.
Where they've gotten past the point where, so you start with cards, and then you find a couple that you think are good, and, they're in these different decks. But if you find something that's just like, destroying all your best decks, like, well, I think ultimately you have to sort of...
But that's when he gave up. He was like, well...
You
this
can't...
is what I'm playing for the Pro Tour.
You can't... You go through this whole process, but ultimately, I think if you're not playing the deck that, like, is testing the best on some level, or is the most powerful, or doing something, gives you some reason, it's sort of like, what's the point? Because anyone can just choose a deck they like, right? I mean, we all like different things, and it's easy to find...
Yeah.
It's easy to find.
Liking something is easy. Like, having a good reason to play it is fundamentally different. But, yeah, I mean, that's... I'm trying to kind of take the villain mentality of, okay, if I were trying to play green-white...
So I just looked up this deck.
Okay.
I'm, like, in a little bit of shock. The over-under on number of mana dorks in Ari Lax's Abzan Midranger deck that won the Pro Tour, how many?
Wasn't it 4 Sylvan Advocates and 2 Elvish Mystics?
It was. How did you know that?
Because I remembered. There was just something that happened.
I'm very interested by this. Because this is not... I mean, it's... The 2 Elvish Mystics eventually went away. But I'm very interested in, like... Sorry, I interrupted you. Finish your thought, and then I'll...
I honestly don't even remember what it was.
I'm sorry.
Didn't the Caryatids go away? I mean, eventually people just started playing more aggressively.
So that Abzan Control became a deck eventually.
Well, yeah, I mean, eventually by the end of, like, Siege Rhino's lifespan, nobody was playing Caryatid with it.
Well, I guess they sort of split into
because
two
it
different
rotated
decks anyways, right?
Yes.
There were, like, once Warden of the First Tree got printed, and, like...
Yeah. The Caryatid decks were mostly for, like, the Abzan Whip decks eventually.
Yeah, and, like, the heavier Elspeth versions.
But what I was going to say from this is, like, even I look back on this stuff, and it's, like this deck is, like... Going against a lot of things that people were playing. Like, they had a very clear plan of what they wanted to do. They identified Courser of Crufix, right, as like a card that they wanted to play. They identified.
There are 3 Elspeths in that list. How bad can it be?
but they identified like the power of Siege Rhino, right? And so I'm sure that a lot of their testing involved like coming up with the best Siege Rhino deck, and then in doing that they did the same thing that Quentin and I eventually did, which was Solemn Visitor, right? Which was like, how do I beat other Siege Rhinos? Well, this Solemn Visitor like makes my Siege Rhinos just attack through your Siege Rhinos, and then our dumb Siege Rhino battle is over. Yeah, and that's really important, right? Like, once you decide where you're at with these new cards, is there something that I can do to make because I hate to break it to you, me, Casey, everybody. We're not the smartest people in the world. And also, there's other people that are really smart at our level that also aren't the smartest people in the world that will likely figure out what we figure out. And the smarter people than us will also figure that out. So our next job is to figure out like
There's so much figuring out going on.
Yeah.
Man, this
But
is
like,
this sounds so difficult.
The logical progression, right? So if this is the best deck right now, what's the deck that's going to beat these decks that are doing well? And then, do those decks have fundamental weaknesses to decks we've already tried?
And can I not overcommit to that plan? Because if I do end up on the best deck, trying to beat myself, I don't want to be too far in that category, right?
You can go kind of too far down the drain where, like, if you're too next level, right?
Yeah.
You end up just playing something that's abysmal.
Yeah, and you're like looking
This should have been so good.
the tragic tale of Grixis control
And
that
once-
states.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Once you've done all of that, I think it's time to sit back and reflect. Am I playing the best deck that I could possibly be playing? Am I missing anything? Is somebody talking about something that I haven't tested, I haven't thought of? And if not, you're good. And if so, continue your process.
Also understanding that, like, especially first week, even with smaller changes to a format, it's just really hard.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to play against at least one person where you're like, oh, wow, I really wish I would have played that instead. Like,
Yeah.
that's just a fact of early format life.
Yeah, I mean, at the Pro Tour when I was getting bent over a barrel by Blue White Flash, that's exactly how I felt. And I was like, oh, obviously.
Yeah, I was like, this deck is like a deck that we tried. It's just like strictly better.
Yeah, it's just not playing a
unfortunate.
bunch of weird cards in it.
Yeah.
It's clever.
I had that same experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it will. Like, you're
Yeah.
just not going to be perfect 100% of the time. It's just too hard. Magic's too hard of a game. So, awesome. Don't forget to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/ccmtg. Our next goal currently is getting Patreon-only episodes back. We are really, really close. Just a couple more donations. And if you are a patron of the show, I need to edit this. All patrons are eligible for it. So you can start at $1 or more. We are like literally within dollars of it. So if you can, are you about to hand me a $10 bill to make it so we can do Patreon only episodes?
No, I wasn't. I was just flipping my wallet and found
Oh.
a $10 bill in it. But, I mean, if you want it that bad.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
I mean, I could be a patron of my own show. It's like
you
sort of inbred, but
Yeah,
whatever.
can.
Being your own patron is like, in general, is kind of challenging.
It's like
though.
liking your own statuses on Facebook, right?
Well, except
You're
there's
allowed
money,
to do
except
it.
there's money involved, so like it's more power to you if you figured out a way to make it work. But it's like a way to launder money.
So, speaking of liking your own statuses on Facebook, where can people find you, Casey?
You can find me on Facebook at Casey Tuna Bloodworth or on Twitter at CC Bloodthirst. Not liking my own statuses on either.
Michael?
Well, I mostly only like Casey's statuses, but I'll make a mental note to like my own sometimes. You can find me on Facebook.
To be fair, I have seen Casey like his own comments on Facebook before.
Call.
No, when you've made fun of me and thought you were really funny, you definitely have done it.
I mean,
Unless I
everyone's yeah.
misclicked it.
All right.
That's
fair.
not something I would do.
All right.
I always like when other people make fun of you.
It's a great time.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can find me on Facebook at Spencer Stephen Howell. You can find me on Twitter at Spencer13H. You can find the show every week on mtgcast.com, constructedcriticism.com, and youtube.com/c/constructedcriticism. You can join the conversation by joining the Facebook group. It's called Constructed Criticism Family. Just ask for a join and make sure that when you join the group that you tag Brother Michael in it. Specifically, hello, Brother Michael. And we're happy to have everybody that we can.
Can you even do that?
What?
Can you tag me as Brother Michael
You
specifically?
could say
can
brother,
brother
and
at
Oh.
Michael.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, man, it's gonna be a rough week.
Well, I mean,
It's gonna be a rough.
so I think you can write in HTML on Facebook, right? So I think I could tag you as like.
I mean, you probably could. It seems
Yeah.
like a lot of effort. I would rather you
Will you
sold
write
me
the
sunglasses.
HTML and we'll just give it to everybody that's joining?
Yeah, I'll make sure it works.
Okay.
I would
do that.
rather you tried to sell me sunglasses, but whatever's good.
You actually can't join the Facebook group if you're trying to sell sunglasses, which, by the way, has been happening a lot on Twitter this week.
Yeah.
Like 3
like
times.
one of you two specifically?
No, well, no,
disappointing.
just Casey's done that. But no, so if somebody sends you a link to Ray-Bans for $19.99, don't click it.
Yeah.
Or
those aren't
do.
real.
I mean, you might get a really good deal on sunglasses.
No, you won't. You'll just get other people.
You're just. It's like a weird
pyramid scheme?
Not even that. It's like
What do they get?
they get more people
Clicking the link.
Yeah, which like
No, I mean
will
they
put
actually
Spyro
they,
on your computer or
they
whatever.
actually sell.
Oh, is that what
crappy,
it is?
No, they sell crappy sunglasses.
Oh, do they?
I mean, they
never clicked it.
probably install spyware too, but they definitely sell crappy sunglasses.
All right,
Oh,
well,
man.
now we know. You can also join the clan by messaging me at Spencer13Dev on MTGO. You can also message Quentin at Urthstep, URTHSTYRPE, and either of us will be happy to add you to the clan. And then you can also tweet at us with hashtag Would That Be Good. Hashtag Would That Be Good is our Twitter outreach program. If you tweet it, we will read it within reason.
God, that sounds like such a.
Oh man,
You've gotten a corporate or something.
What?
it was just a great. If you
Hashtag
tweet it,
Would
we
That
will
Be
read
Good
it.
is our Twitter outreach program. If you tweet it, we will read it. Man, it was like, boom, delivery.
Yeah. You practice that in the mirror? That's great.
Yeah, this morning, actually.
Good job.
How many times?
Enough to get the job done.
Plus or minus 30.
Minus. A lot minus. So I forgot that I tweeted this, but I actually do want to read it. So last week on Constructive Criticism, I said that I didn't do anything in 2016, and I got emails, Facebook messages. I actually don't know if I didn't top 8 a PPTQ, but I'm sure that I missed one in 2016. I also won states. I brought my podcast to new heights through losing Casey Bloodworth, Quentin Pierce, Matt Kling, and Manny Merez all in the same year. Luckily, Casey came back.
Yeah, it feels like disingenuous to talk about Casey leaving when then he's like sitting here.
I did for like a long time.
Yeah.
But not even a year.
Yeah, that's true.
All comes. Manny says he wants to come back sometime too. So
Oh man, so what you're saying is I'm going to get booted.
no.
Just had to get another chair.
Okay.
Just have to get another chair.
Oh man, we
But
could
no,
have some
like
really...
I definitely did achieve a lot in 2016 in Magic, and I'm sorry that I came across disingenuous. And I'll always be doing what I can to improve. I know that winning states is a big deal for a lot of people, even though I didn't get a medal to cry in the shower with. It still means a lot to me.
You're really missing out, I'm telling you. You'll never feel better than after you've cried in the shower with a medal.
Do you listen to Enya or Celine when you're doing that?
By the way, if I actually... So,
mix of
real talk,
both,
you just
Casey.
reminded me that there is a song that I hate more. Oh my gosh, I'm so upset right now. There is, in fact, a song that I hate more than Jar of Hearts.
My Sharona?
No.
Is
Okay,
it by
you're wrong.
Enya?
It is by Enya. Can
What
you guess
song
what
is
it
it?
is?
I think I only know one song by Enya.
It's the worst song.
The long, long journey across the ocean.
I don't know, is that the one that's like Sail Away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
worst.
called Long, Long Journey Across the... It sounds like Sail Away is like, mostly
Yeah.
a given to be in there.
Oh my gosh. Specifically because I had the flu one day when I was like a very small child, and Enya had infomercials for their album.
I think, isn't Enya a person?
Is it? I don't know.
I don't know. You're just making it sound like it was like a
Corporation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they had
An
infomercials.
MNC.
I think
He
it's
or she.
I think it's a her.
She had infomercials for her album, and the entire commercial, it would say something and then just say "sail away, sail away, sail away," and then say something and come back to the same line: "sail away, sail away, sail away." It was.
It's the bulk of the song. So you say it was an infomercial, like an hour long? Did they just play the
it
whole
was
album?
Probably like a 7-minute commercial.
Did it
in
have
between
Billy
so, like,
Mays.
Billy Mays here to talk to you about sailing away. Anyway, let's move on.
That sounds like a great infomercial.
I'm in. I
in.
would buy
Snap.
5.
I'd buy 5 for Spencer.
You know what's the worst part about saying stuff like this on the podcast is I'm gonna get rickrolled with "Sail Away" so many times in the next year.
Oh yeah.
That's
Like-
why I keep it to only saying embarrassing things, because then, there's no video to link to. It's great.
There's no video to link to. Planning on this list for Thursday Modern, Unknown Meta. Any suggestions aside from Caverns and Canopies? So it's an Elves list in Modern with Collected Company. I think that is it Daiwin's Elite has been like a real plus to this deck, and I don't really wait. Is Heritage Druid legal in Modern?
It's in, I think, Morningtide.
Oh yeah, of course it
Yeah.
is. It's Glimpse of Nature that's banned. Herb
Yeah.
Herb.
Yeah.
No, I think this deck is totally reasonable. My only suggestion actually would be Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, I assume they didn't want that for money reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
and also on principle, because that card's stupid.
But other than that, I think
It
that
sounds
all
so
of
much
this,
better when you make it a principled argument. I'm into that.
all of this looks really reasonable to me. I would. Is there any new Lords for Elves that like you could play as a fun of? There's the one that's just gonna be printed. Like,
List is the one that gives things counters when they come into play.
yeah, but that might not be as good
Might
because
not be
it's like a
great.
later Lord.
You're right.
Isn't it just like Adaptive Automaton?
You could maybe play one of those. But that I don't know.
That looks fine.
You know
I
what?
mean, it's just
no,
about...
that's not a real free drop. I was gonna say, you know what? These decks aren't playing that they could was like Phyrexian Metalmorph to like hit off their collector companies, but that doesn't work.
I mean, it does if you sell it hard enough.
If you and your,
If your
opponent both believe it,
yeah.
If you try hard and believe in yourself.
everything is a collected company target.
But does that mean you have to pay life to reveal it?
I would probably say a Reclamation Sage in the main is like the only thing that I can really think of.
Oh yeah. Also, maybe this Elvish Champion in the main somewhere, because that's an Elf Lord that's not stupid.
Well, they already have 4 Elvish Archdruids and 2.
Oh yeah, you
Azuri's.
don't need another one. Yeah, that's fine. I don't know much about this deck, but I think that your list looks fine.
Yeah.
I can't. There's nothing that's glaringly wrong
Yeah, I
to
don't see
me.
anything that's wrong with it. I would
Or that I would-
consider playing a Reclamation Sage in the main. That's it. Paradox Engine / Soul of the Harvest / Paradoxical Outcome # would that be good. So I read all of these cards together and couldn't figure out what he was trying to get to.
What is
Paradoxical
Paradox?
Outcome is the only one that I know.
What is Paradox Engine and what is Soul of the Harvest?
So Soul of the Harvest is whenever a creature enters the battlefield, draw a card.
Okay.
It's a 6-mana 6/6.
Oh, from like Innistrad block, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Paradox,
Engine is that one that's...
yeah, is the whenever you cast a spell, untap all non-land permanents you control.
what was the last card?
And then the last card that he said was Paradoxical Outcome.
The one that bounces everything. So Paradox. Hold on. Let me read. I think.
So if you
I
have
might
a
have
bunch of-
this.
So he didn't finish. I asked him what he was trying to say because I read all these together. He actually wants to do this all with mana dorks.
Oh, sure. So you make a bunch of mana. You Paradoxical Outcome to return everything to your hand.
And then you play Mass Hysteria. And then they all
No,
have
then
haste.
you just play them all again. You've drawn like 30 cards because you have a
Yeah, and you keep untapping
yeah
Right.
all of your lands.
No, all of your non.
All of your all of your non.
all your mana dorks.
Sure.
So
So
every
you,
turn
don't
you
really
go
have anything
ham.
to
you do need
paradoxical
concordant
outcome.
crosswords.
Yeah, you don't really
crossroads.
have anything to paradoxical outcome is the...
The mana dorks. Obviously.
Well, but then they don't have haste, so when you replay them, they untap, like, it's like diminishing.
yeah. I mean, certainly diminishing.
You need Gaia's Cradle. Then you basically have Legacy Elves.
Used in-store credit on half of... Oh, by the way, all these tweets were from Scotty_Prosky at Manashark and me. I think that's all of yeah. And then up next we have at agent_of_blight. Used all my store credit to on half of a Force of Will. Hashtag would that be good. Will we love Legacy? And I think that's great.
Yeah. Sweet.
Hashtag that would be good. Best 2-drop in Modern Jund. Hashtag would that be good.
Best 2 drops. I think he's looking for suggestions.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so he's not. He's talking about my list.
Oh.
Yeah, so I have been a proponent of Abbot of Carol.
I was going to say, I've played a lot of Modern Jund.
Yeah.
Really, a lot. Like, at least one game.
Yeah.
And I would go ahead and tell you with absolute certainty
It's Tarmogoyf.
the best...
Yeah. So,
I wasn't going to do that.
So-
He's a hangerback walker.
Okay, that's not true. So for those who don't know, I have for over a year now, when it was basically just Quentin and me on the podcast, Quentin and I both had been testing a version of Jund with no Dark Confidants. This was when Burn became really, really popular.
Sure.
And instead we played Abbot of Carol Keep and just other stuff in that slot. And I kind of never went back. I think the most Dark Confidants that I played since then is 2. And I would never recommend playing more than 3 Dark Confidants in Jund, even to this day. I think the best 2-drops in Jund are Dark Confidant and Abbot of Carol Keep. Or sorry, not Dark Confidant.
It's
Tarmogoyf
like,
and Abbot of Carol Keep.
after all that,
I would say
I was going to say, no matter what you think, there's one correct answer to this question. If it's best to drop, if there's no S, it's Tarmogoyf.
And
right?
I think that Abbot of Carol Keep is one that I have never found a reason not to play. I think that it gives you aggressive draws in Jund, and it's really weird. One of the things I was like, oh, you can never be aggressive in Jund. It's like, what are you talking about? They just printed Grimflare, and I just switched out some stuff to have like a Grimflare Abbot of Carol Keep deck. I promise you, I have aggressive draws.
Yeah, I would probably rank the best 2-drops in Jund as Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, Grimflayer, Dark Confidant, and then maybe Abbot of Carol Keep. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Scavenging Ooze is great. I mean, that
But-
card is just...
I mean, yeah, I think that Grimflare does. So a lot of Jund is about card quality and like having slight advantages, and Grimflare really does do a really good job of that.
Sort of, but it also requires you to play a bunch of cards that are...
It doesn't require you to play some of the cards that people play.
well, okay, so people maybe get carried away
Yeah.
and play a bunch of cards that are sort of
I actually
hurt
think
you
there's
on that
nothing wrong with
axis.
playing maybe one, however you want to play like your 5th bolt effect.
like a Seal of Fire or
Yeah,
a Tar
I
Fire.
just don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, like I've literally top-aided a PTQ doing that.
But
so.
people did that before just for Tarmogoyf
Exactly.
too. So
Yeah.
that one is like pretty low cost. I mean it's more
It's
like
the Mishra's Bobble
the-
that
yeah.
is offensive.
Yeah,
Mishra's
I've never
Bobble,
done that. I don't like it. But yeah, I think that Dark Confidant just, it was so good in Legacy for such a long time, and people have never let it go. But honestly, like, you can't play some cards that you really want to play in Jund a lot of the time when you play, like, one of the cards that like can be really good sometimes in certain metagames is like Thunder Malachite, and like, or even Tassiger. Like, just cards that, like, if you flip a Tassiger, the cost of just playing Tassigers instead of Dark Confidants, like, is so minimal. You have, like, more Tarmogoyfs, and you still get card advantage later. Like, it does the same thing. And that's what he's wanting to know about for me. And, yeah, my list has some Abbots and Tassigers instead of Dark Confidants. And, yeah, I've been really successful. I've done well in leagues and in dailies back when I was playing this deck a lot. Quentin and I actually, our most viewed stream of all time is actually playing my exact Abbot list back then that played 3 Abbots and 2 Tassigers and like a lot of 1-drops and stuff like that, and it was really good.
Sure.
So, but yeah, I think that your list is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like,
My
I
only-
think that Tarmogoyf and Scavenge Ooze and
Like,
well, it's
yeah.
Tarmogoyf that's better by so much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean that it's like
Then the rest of them are kind of whatever.
it's just
My only
preference,
objection to Abbot of
right?
Carol Keep is that it's a 2-mana spell, not a 2-drop.
yeah. So one thing that, and this is kind of one of the things, is it's really a 3-drop in your deck, because in Jund you play 24 to 25 lands, so it's like a lot more lands than a lot of modern
And
decks.
4 bolts and 5
Yeah.
discard effects
Yeah.
for 1 mana.
Yeah, usually 6 right now.
Yeah, sure.
And then the Tar Fire
and
or
a
Yeah.
Tire Fire or whatever. So it's a really easy 3-drop,
Yeah.
which is, it's not a problem at all. And
no, but it scales well, right? Like
It does.
It's
And
often
then-
better than Dark
and then in
Confidant
some
on
matchups
turn
you
8.
really want to jam it and then be like, you better kill this.
Sure.
It's like, I'm gonna rip your hands to shreds and you're gonna die real quick.
Sure.
So yeah, that's my thought on it, and that's why I was playing it.
Makes sense. It's kind of like a Grimflayer Dark Confidant baby, right?
Yeah.
Like it can sometimes
Yeah,
be
I
one and
mean-
sometimes be sort of the other.
Yeah, I think, and I think Grimflare allows you to have that game plan even a little bit more. So
Yeah.
that's why I was doing it. Lonnie9 says, a Pro Tour review with LTO and CC crossover afternoon special style, bad jokes and all. We tell bad jokes all the time. I don't know what's going to change.
Yeah.
Don't need any
But
crossovers
do
for
you
that.
guys want to talk to Danny?
No.
I mean, wait.
Oh,
wait.
you mean like on a podcast?
See,
um,
I've wanted to talk to Danny before, but usually
Never gotten where the
yeah, it
edge was.
just doesn't happen.
So, fun story about Danny. I think I tweeted this, but we're sitting there and we're talking about how much Danny talks. Because I talk a lot. Like a lot. But Danny is on a whole nother level.
But I also
I'm sure he's
kinda-
talking right now.
But I also, I also love that about Danny.
You would have to give me such good odds.
Yeah.
I also love that about Danny.
I do too. I love Danny. He's literally my co-host on my other podcast. Yeah, so Limited Time Only, for those who don't know, is the limited version of this podcast that we have on churchcriticism.com, where we talk about limited Magic. It's also on the same RSS feed for the time being until we get enough listeners that we want to split them up. And yeah, I'd be happy to do...
We could have a really confusing set review.
We've done... We actually did a every card set review where we rated every card in limited and constructed, and legitimately, Casey wanted to die.
And I wanted to kill both of you first and then die.
See, I think, though, we should just do it where we never say who's talking, and we never say what format we're reviewing them for. So it's just like
So that's super
roulette.
confusing.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, we could do like a video or something after the Pro Tour where we kind of just sit down and like talk about it. I would love something like that, and then we can just release an audio file as well, which is what Lonnie suggested. So yeah, Lonnie, I like that idea a lot. At Honest Bob MTG says, go Marshall LR for taking a stance on LGBT rights. Hashtag MTG, hashtag would be good. I did listen to that. Yeah, go him. Like, honestly...
I didn't hear that. What did he say? Or what was the context?
So it was in the context of... I think it was about the bathrooms.
I don't...
You don't listen.
was
I
a
don't
while
listen
ago.
to podcasts.
Well, he just did it this week. Anyway. We don't talk about that stuff on this because like we're a Magic podcast, and I actually got that from Marshall where we just don't talk. I mean, we make jokes about Donald Trump.
Well,
like,
okay, but
today.
even people who probably like Donald Trump, like,
think it's funny.
he's sort of ridiculous.
He's funny. It's
Yeah.
funny. So our stance is just like love everyone, be kind to everybody, and do what you can to improve the world around you. And we have very conservative listeners. Matthew Medina is a great guy. He's one of our more conservative listeners. We have very liberal listeners. We have, I think Jared is like one of our more, liberal listeners, and that's okay. I think that all these people get along within our Facebook group, and it's just honestly, as long as what you're doing is trying to improve the world around you and like be kind to everyone that you interact with, that's all that we really care about, and we're going to be kind and try and do the same to you as our listeners. So
Yeah, I did not hear Marshall on this, but props to him. The world needs more people taking a stand on stuff like this, so I'm all for it.
finding out there's basically another podcast on the CCMTG YouTube channel. Hashtag really good. Great show, Spencer. 13H. What? So there's a video blog. That's probably what he's talking about.
I mean, Orswin's been uploading some stuff while
Yeah.
you're not paying attention.
Under my name, apparently.
Yeah, I'm making a bootleg podcast, Spencer. You haven't heard it yet. But,
We're here for Austin's Corner, the video podcast.
I know there is a video blog.
I mean, so they're not complaining about it, so we know it's not that.
No, there is a Wednesday Night Warrior is a video blog that I do every week on Pure MTGO that also goes to our YouTube channel. You can check it out. They're like 15-minute YouTube shows, and yeah, I do love doing them. So yeah, give them a chance and check them out. I assume that's what you're talking about, Honest Bob. I tweeted.
Or just
I think
confused and are on
I think I responded to everyone but you because you tweeted this today.
They might just accidentally be on a different YouTube channel. Oh man, Spencer does a podcast about cooking too? Oh, this is so good.
So, to be
wait,
fair,
no, this is
Casey
Bon
and I
Appetit.
do want to have another podcast.
About what?
It's called What's... That's Not a Stat. It's about...
All right, sell it.
Yeah, it's a great podcast.
Basically, it's like moments in sports where it's not a... Basically, the full version is... No one... That's not a stat. That's just some shit that happened. Like... Russell Westbrook averaging a triple-double for the season, or
not even just that.
James Harden
This is
turning the
one
Knicks
this
inside
is the one
out.
that really got me was Russell Westbrook has had more 40-point
triple-doubles
no, is it triple? Yeah, 40-point triple-doubles as a point guard
than all other point guards
they're
combined
since like 1984. It's like, how is that a stat? It's not a stat.
That's an anecdote.
So their favorite variant of that is like, no one has ever averaged 26.3 points or more, 14.1 rebounds or more, and 11 assists over a 2.6 game period during December while it's been snowing on the road.
Right.
He's the greatest.
It's not a stat. It's an anecdote. Yeah.
All right. Okay, I'm in.
But like, You can go pretty deep on this. Like
I mean, a
the
lot
single-
of stats are like that.
Yeah,
to
well,
be fair,
no, and some of them are like real stats, right? Like the person that, like, for example, Wilt Chamberlain scored, as far as like the points scored in a game, in the top, he's actually 5 of the top 6, which is like, how is that a stat? He has 100. The second place is Kobe with 81. Then he has 78, 73, 73, 72.
Yeah, like
How is that a stat? That's just like, who is guarding him?
obviously no one, right?
So yeah, that's our other podcast.
it's very good.
It's like
I'd listen.
It's probably like a 15-minute show.
Yeah. Well, here was episode 1.
No,
Episode 2 next week.
no, we actually did record a sports podcast once when we were inebriated, and
Oh, I forgot about that.
the topic was the debate whether or not Russell Westbrook, and this was like a while ago, and it was like, is Russell Westbrook the next great player, or is he the next who's the next player that I don't like? Carmelo Anthony.
Carmelo. I was gonna say like Stephon Marbury.
So
You could really go a lot deeper with your insults than calling someone the next Carmelo Anthony.
I guess. But that is it for this week, guys. We talked sports at the very end. I apologize. Yeah, check out the
It
YouTube.
was in the context of selling a new podcast. I think it's fine.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. This was a super laid-back podcast. I had a lot of fun. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to check out our sponsor at Oasis Games. Check out the YouTube channel and go to patreon.com/ccmtg to support the show. And, yeah, we're going to... I'm excited to hear more embarrassing stories from you, Michael, after I turn this microphone off.
Wait, you don't want that one on the podcast?
Yeah, one's not enough, man. I got to hear way more. Also, I did record you telling that story.
Oh, very good.
Bye, everyone.
Magic, 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 magic.